Hello, this is Nuance with Nikki, the nitty gritty, even if it's shitty. Over here, we have adult conversations. I talk about stuff that bothers me, which is why my channel is not child friendly, because in order to cope, I need to breathe a bit of adult fresh air. I need to sometimes drink my adult juice just to get through it. Okay, so this is another one of my weird videos. Why is she weird? Because I didn't plan this one. Frankly, I don't need to because, trust me, I know what I'm talking about on this topic. It's my first bloody language. But I didn't plan it, I didn't think through it carefully. This is coming from a gut place. I'm dealing with this one as though it's spiritual, okay? Because for whatever reason, a topic that I normally avoid, and I'll tell you why I avoid it, even though I swear I was born to be an expert at it, quite literally. Um, I avoid it because the kind of people who want to argue with you about this aren't the kind of people that are worth arguing about it, right? And yet, after putting up a video today about Sia Kolisi and Rachel Kolisi divorcing, that's an interracial famous couple in my relationship in my country, famous interracial relationship couple in my country. Um, I guess the algorithm sent me these two stories about these two interracial couples, and so I asked myself, why would the universe send me this? And on the off chance that there is one person out there in the universe somewhere on this good God's earth that needs support around questions with an interracial relationship, I don't know who you are, I don't know where you are, but I'm making this for you. Okay? If you're wondering if you've come to the right place, hello. You're not just looking at Nikki, you are looking at the result of 400 years worth of race mixing, especially in the last four generations. Um, every generation of my family has been an interracial relationship. This was in the midst of South Africa, Britain's favorite colony. So the British Union of South Africa sculpted the most perfect system of racism, which would later be called apartheid. My great grandparents were the last people in their church to get married shortly before the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act came in. I want to say that's around 1910. I was born just after the year after interracial relationships were legalized in South Africa. So that was 1985 when they were legalized to an interracial couple as well. Which means I was born in apartheid, the world's most perfect system of racism. I also am a descendant of the most genetically mixed race community in the world. Um, so you are looking at the result of 400 years of interracial interaction, positive, negative, everything in between, every story, every shape, every shade, every color. You're also talking to an African, and so there you already have the advantage of someone who can speak about colonialism and white supremacy and all of those things. So yeah, I have a lot more to offer than I know if I'm going to give you in this topic, but I am fucking overqualified to speak about this. Okay. Um, if you want to talk about cultural literacy, well, I am Greek, Xhosa, Scottish, and Dutch. That's the basic last four generations of my family. What did I leave out? Scottish, Dutch, Xhosa, Tswana. Yeah. In there's Griqua, there's Madagascan, there's a little bit of Chinese in there as well. There is Italian in there, but I'm just talking about the last four generations, right? My mom is a whole salad. Um, so yeah, that's what I've got to talk about. And I have had many friends in interracial relationships. I watched the world's most peaceful revolution when I was about 8 years old in South Africa. Go from what was known as the most perfect system of racism to the Rainbow Nation. Okay, seriously, I know what I'm talking about, and also have had my own fair share of interracial relationships, right? So basically, this is my home ground. Okay, so I'm here to support you. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you can take from whatever myself and my ancestors have to offer to support you in this. I'm here. And if you're doubting your relationship, I want you to know that that's fine too. If it's too much pressure for you, that's okay. All right? You have one life and you should do what fulfills you and makes you happy. That should be your guiding question. When you die and you lie on your deathbed, what decision will you have hoped that you made right now? Okay? I'm not the one pressurizing you into an interracial relationship. Um, it is the world that's pressurizing you to make your emotional, romantic, and sexual decisions based on other people's agendas. And that is not fair on you. and you deserve better than that, okay? But I want you to know, though, that you're not alone in this, okay? And that even if it doesn't feel like that right now, this is the best and easiest period in history to be in an interracial relationship in the last like 500 years. Okay, before it was very, very normal, like 1,000 years ago. Um, these days, given the last 4 or 5 centuries, it has become a contentious issue. But you should remember that race is just a construct. Then again, so is marriage. Then again, so is time. Right? I've spoken about this on my channel before. There is an argument that time is a construct, an argument that marriage is a construct. Your degree is a fucking construct. Okay. Um, but there's no argument for the fact that constructs don't have a very huge impact on our lives. So we've got to speak about them as if they're real, right? We can say time is a construct, but that doesn't mean you weren't late for this meeting. Do you get what I'm saying? Whew, let me pause. I need my breath. I can feel your anxiety. I'm speaking to one person. I don't know who you are. And I don't, as I said, I don't normally do the spiritual thing on this channel. I've only done it once, but I'm here for you, okay? Just let me process your anxiety for a second and I'll be back. Okay, but before we get into this, if you hear nothing else from my video, you are not filthy. You are not failing. You are not betraying anyone. You don't belong to that person that feels they're entitled to you, okay? You are simply honoring your own soul. And you have an absolute right to do that. Nobody else has the right to violate your own personal choices, okay? So be strong. But if you can't be strong, don't worry. I'm here to be strong for you. All right. So let's read these two posts just to give you context for what's happening. Now, as I said, there's been a recent divorce of some public figures in my country. They were also an interracial couple. You can go and see that. I think I called the video A Divorcee's Perspective. Man, I was very spicy in that one, but they hit me right there in my feels. Divorce? Oh, you want to talk about divorce? Hey, hey, hey. You better have it on a divorcee's level. Oh, you want to talk about interracial relationships? Be willing to talk to the product of one, okay? Or of multiple. I am the place where black and white became one flesh in a time and a place of hate. Okay, so the guy's name was Siya Kolisi, the celebrity, if you're not South African and you don't know who we're talking about, okay? And so in response, I'm going to have to contextualize this for you culturally if you're not South African. But someone said, let us not forget that Matthew Booth, former Bafana Bafana player, cheated on his black wife in 2022. My point is, black women should stop saying that cheating is inherently a black man issue by virtue of the Siya Kolisi cheating saga transpired. Okay, very, very good point from this page. Right, so that you understand, Siya Kolisi happens to be a rugby player. So he's a black celebrity who's divorcing right now from a white person, right? So this page is trying to make the point that this white gentleman over here, a soccer player in our national soccer team, Bafana Bafana, cheated on his black wife, right? And that people should stop saying that black men are inherently cheaters. Now, I absolutely agree with that. People do have a double standard. And I'd love to make a video one day about how the world actually diminishes the contribution of black men and actually also um, um, like makes them pay a higher tax for when they do fail and that kind of thing. But that is a separate issue from this. Okay, so just take that story into perspective. Okay, so recognize over here somebody cheated on their wife, right? And so what this kind of feeds into is that people who are in interracial relationships are often expected to pay a higher social tax, as if we're not just human and as if we don't have the same problems, right? This doesn't just feed into interracial relationships. For example, I am quite ADD, right? I get overstimulated in public. So when there are a lot of people hanging out, I want to go hang out alone in a corner because sometimes being overstimulated and hearing too many people talking just makes me a little bit crazy, right? And then people will go, is that because you're mixed race? And because I'm mixed race? And it's like, there are many mixed race people who have amazing social skills and are not neurodivergent. And there are many neurodivergent people who are not mixed race. Like, am I allowed to just have a quirk without, do you understand? So it falls into the same category of stuff. Okay, now we're going to look at this situation, right? It's a post that's going around on Facebook. And of course, some haters have to laugh about it. But I'm going to comment about all of this in a second. Okay, let me just see if I can move image 2 on the top there. So yeah, it's to do with that couple at the bottom there. Okay, let's see if I can read it. Maybe I need to put my face, everybody else's face. So sorry. As I said, I did not plan this video, so you're just going to have to sit with me through my quirks, okay? So it goes, today my daughter changed her profile picture. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe after 5 minutes, I got a text. I didn't know she was dating a black boy. Did you? It took me all day to think up a response, which I didn't say personally, but thought I would share for anyone else that may not know. Yes, in fact, I did know. But the color of his skin does not define who he is. That should be obvious at this point in history. Okay? What does define who he is how he treats my daughter. I see my daughter dating a boy that comes to my house and shows me nothing but respect, a big deal in my book. It's always yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. We talk about football or baseball, and he tells me bye when he leaves, and has not once shown me a lack of manners or respect. I see my daughter dating a boy who treats her good. He takes her on dates, to ball games, out to eat, not to a club or partying on the weekends. I see my daughter dating a boy who takes her to church with him every Sunday. Now, of course, I'm not a Christian, but I am touched by the fact that this boy fits with the family's values, their personal values. I think everybody should live according to their personal values, whether or not I agree with them, right? And so I could see, as a former Christian, how that would mean a lot to a mom, right? He plays the band, she sits with his family. How many young men these days make church a priority? None of the others have. He doesn't hit her, cuss, lie to her, or make her cry. Would I rather her date a white boy that did, to keep her from dating any other race? Absolutely not. So that's my response to the question I was asked. And I know people have their own opinion, but at the end of the day, the fact that my daughter has someone that loves her and treats her like a queen makes me happy. That's something I have never had in my life, and I'm glad she does. Credit Heather Boys. Okay, before I carry on, there is going to be that one white boy in the comment calling me anti-white male. So I swim out of the balls of a white man. Thank you so much. I also happen to be married to one. Both of them have faced discrimination on my part. Both times I couldn't control it. The one time was the time my father tried to register me as his daughter, even though it was perfectly legal in South Africa. Um, he was discriminated against, and to this day, I have no birth certificates. I mean, I have a birth certificate, but none with his name on it. And to those people going who want to be anti-white about that too, the ANC government has had nearly 30 years to fix that. They completely ignored my requests because there's a thing called monoracial privilege, and lots of people don't want to say it doesn't exist. That is not for a monoracial person to say. That is a person whose parents, grandparents, etc., are all the same color. Okay, you guys who live in a monoracial world don't get to say that. Okay, it does exist. And so I just want to take a breath, and I'm going to speak to you about the history of where this comes from. Again, to me, this is general knowledge. This may be new to you. I hope that these paradigm shifts are going to help you contextualize the world in which this is happening. But once again, if nothing else sticks with you, it should be the fact that you are not alone in this. Okay, but I do want to make a comment on those two videos. I just need the loo. Give me a second. Babe, whoever you are, I can feel your anxiety, the one person I'm making this message for. Babe, if this relationship's too much for you, you don't have to do it. Okay? You can get out. You have a right to also say no. Okay? If you don't have the inner strength for it, that's okay. We're not all strong always. It's fine. There is a big invisible demon of racism behind this. I call it a demon. Okay, I just mean a big colonial thing. We'll talk about it. I'll give you the vocabulary later, okay? But it's bigger than you, and if you don't have the skills right now, that's okay. Just take the lesson and say no. You're allowed to do what you want. If you don't want to get into an interracial relationship, for example, and you're watching this video, that's fine. That's okay. You're allowed your preferences and choices. If, however, the need in your heart right now is bigger than your fear, I'm also here to support you. Let's go through this slowly, okay? So, to comment on situations like this, we've seen hundreds of them, we've seen thousands of them. You may be new to this. This is old, okay? So, the one conversation will go something like, why are you dating a boy of that race? Whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter what race it is. And I'm going to speak mostly to Afro European descendant dating here. It's going to be different if it's a Euro-African. It's going to be different if it's an Afro-European, right? It's a whole different experience. Um, but there is a lot of tension in the Afro-European, very popular kind of, ironically popular kind of interracial relationship. Okay, there's a lot of tension in our context, in our heterogeneous countries. All right, so, whoo, babe, just breathe, breathe. Okay, so you'll often see rhetoric like this, right? People will get all up in their feelings about a woman, especially a man, very often, will get all up in their feelings about a woman dating a man of another race. This is what we call an implied ownership. So it's where the purple man, who doesn't know the purple woman, decides that somehow she belongs to him, right? It's a bit incelish. And that if the orange man comes and takes her, then he's taking her, he's taking his queen. Like, I've had this as well. So my race in South Africa is called colored. It's like, I've had situations, but I'm a Joburg girl, so I live in a much more black and white city than a colored city, right? And a lot of my schooling or whatever has been living in black neighborhoods and going to predominantly white schools. That was my primary school thing. And only on the weekends and holidays was I in the colored neighborhood, okay? If those terms offend you, you've got a lot to learn about South Africa. We can't go down that rabbit hole, okay? But if colored men saw me and they gave me this look, like if they were the only other colored men, they saw me and they went, I would just go, sir, you have the exact amount of a chance with me as any man of any race here, okay? Which for all of you is slim. All right, but that's an implied ownership that has to do with misogyny, men inherently thinking that women by default belong to them. Sorry, sir. No, no. Okay. You'll often hear rhetoric like that. So it's not only men, but you will often hear rhetoric like that. And it's what I'm going to call low frequency people. Okay, the issue here isn't a race issue. This is an issue of facade management. If you actually read the subtext of those comments and everything, read between the lines, and you'll see that the people who tend to be pro interracial relationships, or at least say, hey, leave her alone, leave him alone, will be people who say, but she found her soulmate. She found kindness in him. She's had more respect than ever before, right? And then the purple person, and this could be a white person, it could be a black person, it could be whatever, they'll chip in, well, don't our men have that, and blah, blah, blah. And interestingly enough, you'll often find that people who enter into interracial relationships will say, I had a hard time finding that with my own race. I tended to find it with someone else. Now, is this because interracial relationships are somehow inherently better than monoracial relationships? Not at all. Not at all. Okay. It's that the kind of person who facade manages, what I call a low frequency person, will tend to attract a lower caliber of relationship than somebody who doesn't facade manage. So the person who is indifferent as to whether they date a white man, a black man, a Chinese man, an Indian man, that person often prioritizes what's on the inside. I mean, I feel like every time people are having this discussion, they're failing an open book history test. Martin Luther King covered this. Judge not a man by the um, color of his skin, but by the content of his character. And honey, it's 2024, and someone still has to explain this to you. Do you understand? And so the kind of person who facade manages will also not just have issues around race, that you'll also notice other things. They'll have issues around the person has to be this type of rich, they have to have that type of body, they have to, do you understand? Those kinds of priorities of the surface level stuff, of the appearance, have to do with someone who hasn't got much substance. They haven't done a lot of internal work. People who've done internal work will care more about your caliber, your character, they will use words like respect, they'll use words like love, they'll use words like soulmate, right? And that is why the packaging is something that they're indifferent about. So just chew on that for a second, okay? There are internally focused people and there are externally focused people. There are people who need to facade manage. There are people who need things to look a certain way and don't care how it feels. There are people who need things to look a certain way and don't care about the inherent value. Okay, I can feel you now. You're feeling more at peace. I'm going to pause and I'm going to just listen to my soul and spirit and see how much more I have to give you. The river runs deep with this one, so I may not even be able to give you the whole context. Okay, let's pause. Okay, I am going to throw out just a couple of random thoughts and observations from my nearly 4 decades of being mixed race in a country that's had a lot of racial transformation. Here we go. So first dumb question that comes to my mind. What about cultural differences? Honey, 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 bunny, honey, honey. Okay. A French person and an Italian person have cultural differences. A Sotho speaking person and a Zulu speaking person have cultural differences. Somehow, the cultural difference only becomes a huge thing when the color line is crossed because the two skin colors don't match, right? There are cultural differences, and they can be very contentious for some people, right? There were also such things as complementary cultures. For instance, South Africa in the 1700s had plenty of intermarriages between Xhosa people and Scottish people. Look it up, babe. Xhosa is spelled Xhosa. Okay, just give me a second. Um, other things that I've noticed, I've got to speak from a South African perspective, okay? I've often noticed that Mediterranean men and African women tend to, when you watch their relationships, have a lot of harmony as well. They're very good complementary cultures, okay? And that's because of how women typically show up in those relationships, in those cultures, and how the men typically show up in those relationship and cultures, right? They tend to have quite extreme opposites, and so when I say African women, I mean women who are deeply embedded in African culture tend to go really well with people who are deeply embedded in Mediterranean culture. And then um, in spite of a language barrier, I've often found these people to have a very deep understanding. As international relationships, I know it's my marriage, but I've seen this multiple times. South Africans and Americans tend to match a lot, and they often do so interracially, right? So some cultures are juxtaposed, and then others actually are opposites that attract. They actually fit well together, and you'll often, if you look for them, see a lot of these pairings, right? Um, I haven't seen this so much in terms of marriage. Actually, I've seen it twice, but I have seen it in terms of friends a lot. Indian people and Jewish people also seem to have a very deep understanding of each other. So, yes, if you can make space in your head for cultural differences and cultural clashes, you can also make space in your head for the beautiful nuance that is all of humanity, that also has stuff that's complementary. But many of you will treat food and beverages with more respect than you treat human beings. For example, people will go, "Oh, you're mixed race, or you're colored, so you're not black. You're mixed race, and you're colored, so you're not white." And yet you'll walk into Starbucks or Mug and Bean, and you'll go, "Hey, so that's an espresso, that's an americano, that's a cafe latte, that's a cappuccino. This is just a cup of milk, right?" You can understand that someone like me, a cafe latte or a cappuccino is still a cup of coffee and is still a dairy product. If you're lactose intolerant, it is absolutely going to make you poop. If you have heart conditions, absolutely do not get the one that has caffeine in it, right? It doesn't change because you've added something to it. Somehow in your mind, that isn't a complex thing to overcome. But when it comes to people, then suddenly, oh, I can see the low frequency comments coming now. I know exactly how you're going to twist my words, and I don't care. Um, Somehow, when it comes to people, then you act like it's the biggest, most confusing thing. That is lazy. Okay. What else can I say about interracial relationships? Give me a second. Great. Let's talk about the historic context of this. I was, planning on later on during this, but within the context of mixed race children and colored people in South Africa. But I'm going to just throw out a couple of thoughts, okay? And there are studies based on it. I'm going to put into the description here a link to a study called um, Popular Stereotyping of Colored People. Now, that is, of course, South Africa's name for her Creole people. But how mixed race people are treated around the world, and I can literally tell you this out of my head, will give you an insight into the world that has made a sin of something that is perfectly natural. Okay, if you're wondering how common interracial relationships are, open up The Tempest by Shakespeare, and you'll see how in the beginning there was Prospero's cousin or something had just left, I think it's his brother, had just left his son, Spanish guy, in Afrique, aka Africa, interracial relationship. Okay, you obviously know about Othello, but do you know about the Merchant of Venice, where I think it's the Prince of Morocco was offering himself to Portia? Yeah, it was the Prince of Morocco. Okay, so these things were common before the status dynamics changed. Okay, but in a white supremacist world or in a perfectly racist world, right, there is a notion around, proximity to whiteness being a thing, blah, blah, blah. But more important than that, to the white supremacist world and everybody that operates in it, is this notion of racial purity. I mean, look at how the English word limits me. I've got to say purity. So by implication, someone like me is, that's right, right? So inherent in this Anglophone world, in this English speaking world, is the idea of the original sin of interracial relationships. And as such, your kids, mixed race children, especially women, and anything to do with them, subconsciously in the collective consciousness, has this cloak of sexual shame, right? When people ask, when you're mixed race, they don't ask, who are you? They go, what are you? Normally, I don't answer people like that, but if they do directly ask, I would say, I'm a human being with dignity. Okay? But because of this fake construct called race, people then see the original sin as interracial relationships. People, constantly sexualize interracial relationships. So they will ask a mixed race child questions they'd never ask a monoracial child. They'll make a mixed race child when they're far too young confront their parents having sex. Now, it's not like your parents didn't have sex. Literally, everybody watching this, your parents fucked, right? But you constantly put that in the face of the mixed race child, right? Dumb questions that make no sense, like, so whose child are you? Whose child are you, huh? Your mom's or your dad's? Your mother's or your father's? You can't be both. You can't be both. Answer me. Seriously? Let me ask you that. Monoracial person. Whose child are you? Your mother's or your father's? You can't be both. Do you see why these discussions aren't even worth getting into? But I'm going to look at it within the South African context, okay? I'll give you our history, and I can actually speak a bit on global history as well on there. So, in the South African context, in the late 1500s, early 1600s, when a lot of Dutch and many European people started coming here, and so did people all the way from China, they all started coming here. This is before the castle was built in 1652 for the South Africans, okay? Um, there was a trade station, and it was run by a man named Achimosho. He was a Khoisan man. Khoisan is the indigenous people of South Africa. Now, the nature of Southern Africa is that the cultures never saw a woman's body as dirty. As such, you'll see a lot of cultures where breasts are perfectly displayed. There are even ceremonies in some cultures for displaying breasts, right? But now imagine European men in the 1500s and the 1600s coming here, where the women were dressing like this, right? And like the thingy up to here. And these were Christian men and all of that, and they'd been on a ship for at least 6 months with a whole bunch of dudes. It doesn't take a lot of imagination what would have happened. So a whole bunch of kids were born. These kids today are called the Griqua, Iqua, Griqua, right? Therein starts my mixed race heritage. And so when it came to the Griqua people, they weren't really quite accepted by anybody. Now, obviously, Africa is much more accepting of any of her children. So they were called Rikana, which means the white children, which is inaccurate. But I don't really perceive that as a rejection. I just perceive it as a description, right? Everybody in Africa had descriptive names before that, such as Baklaping, people of the fish, Babokeng, people who live with the dew, Bakubang, people of the hippo, Isizulu, people of the sky, right? Like, so it always, Khoisan, Khoikhoi, men of men, the tall ones. So it always described, it was very poetic in its descriptions, right? However, the name that the Europeans gave to the Griqua kids, these mixed race kids, this first generation, was Buster of bastards, and that means bastards, saying that they didn't come from Christian marriages, okay, and therefore they are bastards, therefore they're not legitimate. So there's the undercurrent of racism, but it is kind of whitewashed around religion, later, and then would say, but well, it's not Christian marriages because those women themselves aren't Christian, aren't baptized. So to help you understand the South African context, it was perfectly okay in South Africa to enslave a person when they were unbaptized, right? A lot of our words for people have got to do with them being savage, unbeliever, that kind of thing. A lot of our slurs, right? And so, um, the way that you got free in South Africa was if a missionary came over and baptized you, and that's why the Dutch at the time would chase missionaries away. Okay, so within this sphere in which these mixed race kids are being born, very soon the most genetically diverse slave trade will start. It'll come all the way from Malaysia through India down to Madagascar, East Africa, and it comes all the way down to South Africa, and it creates the most genetically mixed slave trade in the world. Right, and so you've got this going on. But inherent in this whole thing is this idea of Christianity, and you've got this idea of white supremacy, right? These are now starting to link up. Okay, so in the fathers calling those first mixed race kids busters, right? That was their way of saying, I am not your dad. I reject you. Okay, and we'd have different names later on. Folkies, the little folk. Um, oh, coon. We were called coons as well. And so later on, that's why the initial people who got free from slavery were asked, "What do you want to call yourselves?" And they said coloured. Of course, later on in South Africa's history, that was imposed upon people who don't necessarily fit that label. We'll get to it. That's not what matters now. Okay, so that's what's happening on South Africa's shores at the same time. Now, let's follow the slave ships, so, shall we? They start up here in your screen is the opposite of my logic. It's fine. They start up here in, let me do it this way. They start up here in Madagascar. They go down, India. We've got did I say Madagascar? I meant Malaysia. We've got India. We've got Madagascar. We've got Mozambique. We've got Mauritius over here, and they come down to Cape Town to the Cape. Right now, we're in the Atlantic. Those same ships will travel up. They'll go to West Africa, and they'll head to where? The Americas. Okay, same ships, different people. All right. Um, Dropping people off. So what's happening with their brothers and cousins in the Americas? And literally, these people used to write to each other, and they did refer to each other as our brothers in America. So in that context, you've got white people outnumbering brown and black people, right? And so you had a lot of the violation of black women there, similar to what was happening in South Africa to black and Asian and Khoisan and blah 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 women, right? But in this instance, they create something called the one drop rule. So the one drop rule goes something like this. I have a child. This child is a mulatto. Now, I can show you one day when I talk about this more, I'll show you receipts on this, right? But they didn't believe that mulattoes, as in a mixed race person, a mule, could breed. So they came up with the one drop rule. I wonder if I should actually just show you that video now. Let me pause and see if I can. Screw it, guys. I found this in my software. This was a video that I made at a different point. It was me talking about the one drop rule and trying to explain it. Also unedited at this point. I must have had insights with my genius. So let's see what I had to say. What? Am I still running? Hey, look, maybe it wasn't meant to be. I'm trying to fix the problem, but yeah, as I said, I wouldn't edit this, and I've got a client soon before I finish this recording. Okay, so we're talking about the one drop rule. Anyway, in the American context, with which was much more of a Spanish colony at some point, right? Um, they had very different words for how they described mixed race kids, and if you're wondering what this has to do with interracial relationships, hello, the result. Okay, um, but basically, in them saying we have a one drop rule, they believe that mulattoes, which is what they call people who are half black, half white, could not breed. So they said, okay, fine, those kids won't be able to inherit anything. Of course, if those kids had inherited something, um, then they wouldn't have been able, they would have been able to set their mothers free from their fathers who were their mothers' human traffickers, right? But in order to maintain the slavery, they thought, okay, no, let's write a law, no mulattoes can inherit anything. Cool, fine. So they thought that was going to be the end of it, right? But then they found out, as you can imagine how, that mulattoes could in fact breed, mulattoes being mixed race people, right? And so they found out that they could in fact breed. Where is my face? I want to see my face. Okay. Um, they found out that they could in fact breed, And so they said, okay, well, mulattoes and quadroons, which is what they called kids like me, kids who are three quarters white, right, and had one quarter black. They said, fine, mulattoes and quadroons can't inherit. And so that prevents the quadroon then from setting their family free. So the entire reason was to keep, right? And then the more that they discovered this, the more they realized, wait a minute, if we want this whole slavery thing to go on, we're going to have to erase mixed raceness as a whole concept, right? We're going to call anybody who is a centimeter black, we're just going to call them black. As a way of not just erasing their uniqueness, but ultimately so that we can keep slavery going forward, right? And so this was a rule that was designed by human traffickers, by rapists, quite frankly, by people who would deny their own children, quite frankly, rather than let go of the money and the status and the sense of importance that came from slavery. And it is an idea that is still deeply embraced in the American mind. And it's not one that the Americans have quite reflected on or questioned in any way. They will pledge allegiance to that idea on the basis of its being American before, right? And very interestingly enough, when they listen to South Africans, a country that has done a lot more processing over race, they often project bad faith onto us, right? But that's another situation. Now, so the same mixed race child in the South African context um, is called, you know, a Griquana, they called a bastard, they called this and they called that. You are rejected. That same mixed child on the American side is then in this context called black. What is happening in the Congolese side, by way of example? In this instance, while South Africa and the United States, well, it wasn't in the United States, it was in the Americas, were saying, hey, you have no father. White supremacy in Congo, um, a Belgian colony at the time, was saying to kids, you have no mother. So they would take mixed race kids away from their moms, right? Um, what's happening later on in Vietnam, right? There are kids, I cannot remember the name. I haven't heard it since 2010, so that would make it 14 years ago, but I believe it was called Guijo, something like that. There is a song about it. Let me see before I go to my lesson if I can find it. Okay, guys, so I mispronounced that. That was Buido. Buido. I do apologize. It is not my first language. I want to say Vietnam, but I may have that wrong as well. I am in a hurry. The point is that the story left an imprint on me, even if I don't remember the details. And one day I will correct myself on that, okay? I am in a rush though. And so, Aibu. Okay, so the lyrics go, they're called Buido, um, the dust of life, conceived in hell and born in strife. They are the living reminder of all the good we failed to do. We can't forget, must not forget. They are our children too. So it's about mixed race children being thrown away in this country, okay? Where America, I believe, was having a war. The point is that mixed race children, a reflection of what people thought of interracial relationships, were chucked away. Later on in the South African context, you will have words like Facades, which means mixed race dog. You will have words like Bushman, whatever, whatever. Okay, they're very loaded. I can't get into all of them, but the point of this whole thing is that people in their own racist white supremacist mind, or even if they're black, will have the idea of a half human being around a mixed race child and around interracial relationships. But what I'm hoping to prove to you is that they're not even consistent ideas. They keep changing. This person says that person says this, right? They can't even agree on what they think is okay. So this time 100 years ago, it would not have been considered an interracial relationship for a white person to get involved with, say, a Lebanese person, because they would be considered white. Um, whatever. And then today they're not considered white enough not to bomb, right? Arabic people also had that relationship to white people. Hispanic people had that relationship, but then it changes as convenience goes. So people like the Irish were once considered racially inferior. People like Greeks, people like Italians, right? It depends on what the racist mood is then. Then today, this couple that's perfectly legitimate, literally like happened to my grandparents and my community's grandparents, with the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act. The person just said, hey, from now on, these marriages are illegal. So the ones that are already in place, you're fine. Any new ones are illegal. It's the whims of the world, and the whims don't stay the same, which should tell you that they're not objective. They normally have an economic objective underneath them, right? It's normally because somebody is extracting wealth or extracting gain from the narrative that this race is inferior, right? And then within that context, if you happen to fall in love across the color line, it becomes very loaded for you, right? In your era right now, you are not being chased down by the police or having the threat of your baby being taken away from you in the very real threat that I was born into. Just like me, Eartha Kitt in America, she doesn't have her dad's name on her birth certificate either, right? Your kids aren't going to go through that. Do you understand? It's the fastest growing race group, and it's the fastest growing type of relationship. You aren't being put into solitary confinement. Later on, I will make a video about my visit to the Constitutional Court here in South Africa, which is built on a previously racist prison. Um, so you will see the solitary confinement places that people were locked into. And I hope you'll realize that a little bit of criticism from your family or a little bit of rejection, whatever, is a drop in the ocean compared to what other people faced. What you can, and I'm not trying to gaslight you, I think it's very painful to learn that your family has conditional love for you, right? Those people who ask things or say things about mixed race kids like, where will they fit in? They're not saying anything about a mixed race child. What they're saying about themselves is they would love a child conditionally based on hair texture and skin color, right? They're saying something about how they were raised, right? A person doesn't stop belonging. I am a person, I am a clump of cells, just like you. You, a clump of cells, have no authority to tell me that I don't belong. But you can decide that I don't fit in. Why? Because fitting in is a matter of other people's acceptance, which varies as I've shown you historically. Okay? But belonging is something that can't be questioned. You see what I'm saying? I am watching the clock now. Okay? Let me hear what my heart has to say. Perhaps I've told you enough. It does sound like I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. Um, okay, I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, or one of those people that wrote that they hold truth self-evident, that all women are created equal. I believe it was him. I might have the wrong politician, and I'm so sorry if I do. That had a mixed race sex slave. Most people will call it mistress. Why? Because their wording for how people see the same person changes, right? And especially when people see a mixed race person as half. That will inform a lot of this idea as half. So the English language will use words like black, black hearted, black male, and then call people who are called people of the sky, blah, 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 black, right? And so the English language has put a negative connotation on people who are black. In that same way, it speaks about mixed race people as half. It always says half or mixed race, as opposed to Spanish, which called them mulatto, right? Hybrid, speaking about them as farm animals, right? But then juxtapose that with French, which calls them créole, le métis, multicultural. Whole different connotation there, right? And a lot of these ideas have shaped not just how you see mixed race kids, but how you see interracial relationships as half as valid. People being half worthy of your respect and that kind of thing. I have run out of time. It is 45 minutes. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments if you need more help with this. I want to talk about the shaming that interracial relationships go through, like when they have twins and that kind of thing. I want to bring more receipts. There will be haters in the comments. You will be duly ignored because you're not worth speaking to. Um, it's low frequency, and we're here trying to build love. But if I have miscommunicated in this video, I hope you hear my heart, that you are in a much better position than you think you are. You have much more support than you think you have for your interracial relationship, and that you are not alone, and way worse obstacles have been overcome in very recent history. Okay? We've got your back and we're here. We've survived it. Okay. I gotta go teach someone some Afrikaans grammar instead of talking about the race and the racism. I hate this topic. This has been Nuance with Nikki, the nitty gritty, even if it's shitty. I'm sorry if it's been too nitty gritty, and I'm sorry if I spoke about stuff that was shitty. I'm also sorry for my stumbling. I was shooting from the hip here. Guys, have a lacquer day. See you soon.